The day before the largest football tournament ever staged, a supporter somewhere in North America opened an email from FIFA. The message informed them that a policy had changed. Something they'd been told they could bring into a World Cup venue. Something as ordinary, as unremarkable, as basic to spending several hours outdoors in summer heat as a reusable water bottle, was now prohibited. Not a prohibited item with any credible security rationale. Not something that had been overlooked during months of event planning, and only recently identified as a risk. An empty, transparent, soft-sided plastic bottle of the kind carried, without question, into football stadiums, outdoor concerts, and public parks across the world. Banned 5 days before the opening match, after supporters had purchased tickets, arranged travel, booked accommodation, and in many cases already crossed oceans to be there. The response from supporter communities was immediate, specific, and proportionate to what had happened. An English fan group called it the latest in a pattern of commercial decisions dressed as policy. The Football Supporters Association said what the situation plainly was, that once again, with this tournament, the people who attend matches have been treated as an afterthought rather than a constituency worth consulting. The British Prime Minister described the decision simply as wrong. Within days, FIFA reversed course, announcing that supporters could bring a single factory-sealed 500 milliliters bottle into venues. The reversal was a correct outcome. But the episode deserves examination beyond its resolution, because the water bottle ban is not primarily a story about stadium policy. It is a compressed version of a pattern that has defined the governing body's management of this tournament across 18 months of preparation, a decision made without meaningful engagement with the people it affects, a commercial logic that was apparent to everyone watching, a public reaction forceful enough to make the original position untenable, and a reversal that arrived not because the institution reconsidered its values, but because the criticism reached a volume that couldn't be absorbed. Decision, backlash, reluctant correction. That sequence has repeated itself across multiple issues, across multiple months, and it did not begin with a water bottle. To understand what the water bottle ban actually represents, you have to place it in its physical context. This tournament is being staged in conditions that make hydration not a preference, but a genuine welfare consideration. Research from universities across the United Kingdom and Canada, drawing on 2 decades of climate data for the host venues, found that 14 of the tournament's 16 stadiums are projected to experience heat stress conditions exceeding recognized safety thresholds for both athletes and spectators. Not a handful of outlier venues. 14 of 16, in a hotter-than-average summer, which climate science now describes as the baseline expectation rather than exception. Up to 9 stadiums could exceed the critical heat stress threshold for half the tournament's duration. 4 venues could see wet bulb globe temperature readings of 32 degrees Celsius, a measurement that accounts for heat, humidity, and solar radiation simultaneously, and is considered a more accurate indicator of physiological stress than air temperature alone. The venues presenting the highest thermal risk include Houston, Monterey, Philadelphia, Kansas City, Boston, and the New York-New Jersey Stadium. None of them have air conditioning in configurations that would materially affect conditions for spectators. Houston's combination of heat and humidity was described by one climate specialist as the most demanding of any host city. A deputy director at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration noted the specific risk to supporters as distinct from the risk to players. Fans are not professional athletes in conditioning programs. They have underlying health factors. When they cheer, their metabolic rate climbs and their body temperature rises in conditions where the ambient environment is already working against them. FIFA's formal response to the heat conditions was to mandate 3-minute cooling and hydration breaks at the 22nd minute of each half across all matches. The decision attracted a secondary interpretation almost immediately that a scheduled break at a fixed minute in each half, reliably timed, delivered a predictable advertising window for broadcast partners. Supporters groups and commentators pointed out that framing a commercial scheduling convenience as a welfare initiative was not primarily a welfare initiative. Whether that reading is entirely fair is genuinely contestable. What is not contestable is the juxtaposition it created. FIFA mandated structure hydration intervals for the players on the pitch. Then, in the same week, it attempted to prohibit the spectators in the stands from bringing their own means of staying hydrated. One constituency received mandated welfare provision. The other was told an empty plastic bottle was now against the rules. That contrast was noticed immediately, cited widely, and captured with unusual clarity the double standard running through this tournament's approach to the people inside its venues. The water bottle episode, for all its symbolic accessibility, is one thread. The travel restriction situation is another, and it is one whose consequences cannot be reversed because no reversal is available. Two presidential proclamations, one issued in June, one in December of last year, placed nationals from 39 countries under travel restrictions affecting their ability to enter the United States. The proclamations contain specific exemptions. Athletes, coaches, essential support personnel, and their immediate family members are excluded from the restrictions. Those carve-outs were sufficient to ensure that all 48 qualified nations could send their teams. Iran's players cross from Tijuana on match days. Haiti's players will take the field. Ivory Coast captain said plainly that his team can compete without supporters in the stands, that winning is what matters. But read the exemptions for what they exclude as carefully as for what they include. Spectators are not exempt. Journalists are not exempt. Corporate partners of FIFA are not exempt. The extended families of players, cousins, aunts, grandparents, the wider community network of people for whom watching their national team at a World Cup will be a life-defining experience, are not exempt. The proclamations draw the tightest possible boundary around the minimum requirement for the football to function and leave everyone else subject to the full scope of the restrictions. The practical consequence is that supporters from four qualified nations, Haiti, Iran, Ivory Coast, and Senegal, face direct, documented barriers to attending matches on American soil. Their national teams earned the right to compete through qualifying campaigns that demanded everything. Their supporters saved money, applied through official ticketing channels, and made plans around attending the tournament. Those plans ran into a legal instrument that FIFA had no authority to override and, by its own account and its public conduct, chose not to formally contest. A Senegalese supporter, Jibril Gay, said at the Africa Cup of Nations in January that his position was straightforward. If the United States was not prepared to welcome fans from certain countries, it should not have agreed to host a universal competition. That statement does not require interpretation. It identifies a contradiction that FIFA has not answered. The institutional pressure building around that contradiction has not been limited to supporter groups. 8 UEFA delegates on the FIFA Council walked out of a meeting earlier this year. Senior administrators from the governing body of European football, not protesters outside a building, but officials inside a formal institutional setting, removed themselves from a FIFA Council session as a collective expression of dissatisfaction with how the tournament was being managed. The full details of what triggered the walkout have not been disclosed. The act itself is a disclosure. Human Rights Watch wrote formally to FIFA in May, describing grave concerns about the impact of border and immigration policies on players and fans, and citing FIFA's own non-discrimination statutes as a stand of the tournament's operational reality was failing to meet. Amnesty International published a report in March characterizing conditions in the United States as a human rights emergency, citing immigration enforcement practices, restrictions on freedom of expression and assembly, and documented discrimination against LGBTQ communities. The tournament opens tomorrow. The conditions described in that report have not changed. Into this accumulated environment, the empty seat data has arrived as the most visible and directly measurable expression of what those conditions have produced. The Club World Cup stage in the United States last summer drew approximately 400,000 empty seats across its matches. That was an available data point in the summer of 2025. It was not acted on in any operationally meaningful way. The early indicators for this tournament have tracked in the same direction. More than 17,000 supporters canceled tickets they had already purchased, a quantified translation of the boycott conversation into individual decisions by real people. Hotels across the 11 American host cities are running below their initial projections. Houston's hotel sector, which had anticipated full occupancy, is not sold out. Seattle's June hotel bookings are below the equivalent figures from the previous year. Dallas carries somewhere between 350,000 and 490,000 unsold tickets across 9 matches. An England warm-up fixture in Tampa, held 5 days before the tournament opens, drew 13,000 spectators to a venue built for 69,000. The deterrents that produce those numbers are specific and documented. The 39-country travel proclamation, a visa processing freeze that at its widest affected nationals from 75 countries, a formal travel advisory issued by a coalition of 120 civil society organizations, warning international visitors of serious risks associated with the current environment in the United States. LGBTQ supporter organizations in both England and Germany announcing they would not bring a visible presence. The former FIFA president publicly advising fans to stay home. The Swiss legal scholar who had worked on FIFA's own governance reforms telling supporters the tournament would look better on television than in person. Each of those deterrents operated on its own logic. Together, they function as a cumulative argument against attending, and hotel occupancy data, the aviation booking figures, and the secondary resale market have all confirmed that the argument was heard. Here is a conclusion that the full sequence of evidence demands, stated without qualification. FIFA had time, substantial time, to respond meaningfully to every signal that preceded this tournament. The Club World Cup attendance data was available 12 months ago. The travel ban concerns were formally submitted through letters and institutional reports in autumn and winter. The water bottle policy could have been resolved in consultation with supporter groups that were already engaged and already asking questions. The dynamic pricing and seat map. Complaints were being filed through official channels from the moment the ticketing system opened. A report documenting that all but one host city Human Rights Action Committee had fallen short of their commitments was published months before the first match. The governing body received all of it. Its consistent response was to issue statements affirming commitment to its values, reference its human rights framework, and maintain the commercial architecture without operational adjustment, unless the public pressure became commercially damaging enough to force a specific reversal, as with the water bottle ban. That approach has consequences that are now visible in the record, in hotel ledgers, in resale prices, in 17,000 canceled tickets, in a pre-tournament stadium with 56,000 empty seats, in the inbox of a supporter who received an email 5 days before the opening match telling them their water bottle was prohibited, and another email 3 days later telling them it was permitted after all. The football starts tomorrow, and the football, when it arrives, will be genuine. The Azteca tomorrow night, Toronto the day after, Los Angeles the same evening, 48 nations, and everything that a tournament at this scale reliably produces. None of what has surrounded this build-up will diminish a great goal or a historic result or performance that people will be describing 30 years from now. But there's a distinction worth holding on to as those moments arrive. Extraordinary football and a well-governed tournament are not the same achievement. A competition can produce one without the other. The travel bans, the human rights reports, the institutional walkout, the 17,000 canceled tickets, the water bottle that was banned, and then unbanned in the same week. That record exists independently of what happens on the pitch between now and July 19th. The football will not rewrite it. So the question worth sitting with as the tournament finally begins is this. When you watch an institution respond to criticism only when the noise becomes impossible to ignore, and correct course only when the commercial cost of not doing so exceeds the commercial cost of reversing, does that look to you like an organization that made mistakes and learned from them? Or does it look like something more deliberate than that?